to this day. Next slide, please. Thank you. We're cognizant of your time, especially when it comes to doing the Zoom version of an AGM. And today's AGM will run 1 hour from 3 to 4 with some time for questions. Participants are automatically muted to minimize background noise. We still like to hear from you. Please write your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the AGM. Questions will be monitored but answered at the end. If we run out of time to answer all the questions, you may email us at info@collegeofdietitiansbc.org, and I'll repeat that, info@collegeofdietitiansbc.org, and we'll follow up after the AGM. If you experience technical issues, please use the Q&A box to notify us, and we'll do our best to help you resolve the issue. Most issues are related to internet connection or workplace firewall. And we're recording today's AGM, and we will provide that recording online after today's session. Next slide, please. In accordance with our bylaws, Section 29, an annual general meeting of the college must be held in British Columbia at a time and place determined by the board once in every calendar year and not more than 15 months after the last preceding annual general meeting. And you'll see some of the important matters that we're going to deal with today. Some of them you will be voting on. Next slide, please. Okay, before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to say a few words. I'd like to remind you firstly that yesterday was National Indigenous Peoples Day. This is a day recognizing and celebrating the cultures and contributions of the First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and Indigenous peoples of Canada. I would also like to say that your board of directors and staff believe in cultural diversity and inclusion. If you'd like to make a difference, please consider putting your name forward for director. In attendance today at the office are just the staff and me. Joining us online is our current board of directors, Teresa Sividen, Don Grant, Tina Hartnell, Katie Hunter, Jack Chinko, Nita Marriott, Jack Trumley, and Jill Werbois, our current vice chair. Before we start the AGM, I'd like to say a few words about the past year. On behalf of the board of directors, it is a distinct pleasure to thank all the committee members and most importantly, recognize our staff for their professionalism and outstanding contributions throughout the past year. Thank you so very much. The board welcomed 2 new directors on April 1st for the electoral regions of Vancouver Island and Northern Interior BC, Anita Marriott and Katie Hunter, respectively. Anita and Katie bring a variety of experience in public policy, governance, and leadership that support an effective board. Thank you for your engagement and commitment to the college. This year was marked by significant progress on the strategic plan and the modernization announcement by the Ministry of Health. To support innovation and success, the board continued to focus on solid governance and change management while ensuring prudent physical and risk management. The board also welcomed and oversaw the return of work of our registrar last November and provided support to the team during her maternity leave. The board kept overseeing the progress of the strategic plan and reviewed board policies to implement an electronic banking system and move away from volunteerism for the board and committee's involvement. You may also have noticed our brand new website. And for those that may not be aware, after much planning and preparation, the office has been moved to the Health Hub at 200 Granville Street, Vancouver, thereby allowing us to share services with other colleges. I would encourage you to review the annual report when you have a few minutes. It is a very detailed document of the college's activities for the past year. You will find it online. And finally, many of you may know that the college follows Robert's Rules of Order when conducting meetings. That means that the chair does not normally put forth motions. However, given this is a virtual meeting and background noise from everyone being unmuted would make it far too difficult to hear and recognize anyone online. In other words, on your behalf, I will be proposing the mandatory motions that you will be voting on today. I will now officially call the meeting to order at 3:07 p.m. And you can see from the agenda Our first order of business will be approving the agenda as shown here. Next slide, please. And okay, so I propose that CDBC registrants resolve to accept the agenda for the 2019-20 annual general meeting as circulated. Please vote yes in the poll, and we'll give you a few moments so that we can record that. Okay, that meeting has passed and will be recorded in the minutes. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, some introductions, and I will introduce both the board and the staff. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, before I introduce everyone, I'd just like to say that I've served on several boards, and I'm currently on 2 other health-related boards. And at the risk of alienating these boards, I'd like to say this is the very best board that I've ever served on. We normally reach consensus on all items. We're a very balanced and diverse board. We're not afraid to speak our mind, and we get the job done. So, and that's been proven with a recent outside survey of the board and how well we've done, and it shows that we scored top marks as a board. So in the picture from left to right is Teresa Sivaden, Don Grant, Anita Marriott, Jack Chinko, myself, John Meneghello, Jill Warboys, our current vice chair, Jack Trumley, and Katie Hunter. Thanks, everyone. Next slide, please. Okay, here's our wonderful staff. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with a lot of great people, but as a board, we're very, very comfortable with this staff, led by Joni Bouchard on the left, and our newest member of the team, Elaine Houston. Elaine, Alana Sue, Sabrina Lauser, and our Deputy Registrar, Melanie Journoux. Thanks very much, everyone. And I just want to say that missing from the picture is Jia Zhang, a project coordinator from February to November of 2019. She's now working on a project as a contractor, the IED project. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll have this, I'll propose this resolution or motion that CDBC registrants resolve to accept the minutes of the June 14th, 2019 annual general meeting as circulated. And if I could ask you to vote, please. And that resolution is passed and will be recorded in the minutes. Thank you, everyone. Next slide, please. I will now invite you to turn to the annual report. You would have received this report by email last week. The 2019-20 fiscal year annual report ending March 31st of this year is a very comprehensive report of the college's activities for the past fiscal year, which is also available on the college website. I'd like to thank staff for putting together this very professional document, which is very easy to read for registrants and the public. And on the next slides, we'll highlight some of the key initiatives or activities. Next slide, please. Now, throughout the course of a year, the board reviews a number of matters, and I would say that these that you're seeing here, the first few are the ones that we would regularly deal with. That I would like to draw your attention to the last 2 bullets, and those are the ones that are slightly different this year, and that is the support and oversight to important strategic projects for the college, and namely the office move and website redesign. Very, very impressive. And the last one, which I can't read very well because of a piece of paper here, but I would say that it is the, let me see if I can get my okay, it is the modernization by the Ministry of Health of the regulatory framework for colleges. Thank you. And I think next slide, please. And for the committee reports, I'd like to turn it over to Joni to take the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I will take a minute to thank everyone who is in attendance today, and also to bear with us as we navigate through technology. I think so far we did a pretty good job. It's always there's always some surprises when we use technology. I'm sure all of you know, as we are going through this pandemic, and everyone had to be impacted by significant changes in their practice and in their personal life too. So we will continue with the committee's report. This is just a reminder on this slide to remind you what are the statutory committees under the law for the college. So these committees support the main function of what we do, namely registration, quality assurance, inquiry, and discipline. I will take a bit more time to go into the report of each one of them. Next slide, please. Okay, so the registration committee this year spent a lot of time supporting the changes that we just implemented for the oversight of restricted activities for dietitian NBC. This had actually started in the previous fiscal year and was carried out and finished this year, and we implemented the changes as of April 1st. So just a reminder, and I'll speak to it more later, but we have shifted the oversight of restricted activity from registration to quality assurance. So the registration committee helped changing the bylaw that were required for this, policies, guidelines, and more resources. The registration committee also approved the contractor for the internationally educated dietitian grant that the college was successful in obtaining last August. This project aims at reviewing our whole process to assess international educated dietitian and create an online portal so it facilitates the application and assessment of these dietitians. The registration committee also assessed 6 new international educated applicants and approved 5 applicants for temporary registration. If you would like to see more registration statistics and data, please have a look at the annual report. We provide information around CDRE, pass rate, country of origin for the internationally educated applicant, and a lot more information that you'll find very useful and relevant. Next slide, please. Second report is the Quality Assurance Committee. So as I've just mentioned, the registration quality spent a lot of time helping and supporting the transition of oversight of restricted activity from registration to quality assurance. So obviously, the QA committee was also very heavily involved this year into preparing for these change. By changing the oversight of restricted activity, there was a change in the cycle going from 3 years to 1 year. So the committee oversaw the implementation of that change in cycle, and also approved changes to the quality assurance framework and the continuing competence program. Some of the example that was worked on was the refinement of the language in some of the tools that are used in the competence, the CCP program, for example, the portfolio. More resources were developed as, for example, the samples that are provided to registrant, and a lot more resources to make sure that as we shift from a 3 years to a 1 year, and also as we shift to the oversight of restricted activity into the CCP, that registrant are prepared and feel supported to do this change. The committee also approved a first competency matrix to aid the committee in succession planning, orientation, and training. They reviewed 1 CCP submission as part of the framework. And they also publish and review topics of interest to help registrant for public safety. And some of these examples are social media, marketing, endorsement, the restricted activities, and privacy legislation. Most of these things are published in the Q&A section of our monthly newsletter, but we are also working very hard to include a lot of these resources on the website, and that will be coming within the next few weeks, months. Thank you, and next slide. Okay, the inquiry committee is responsible to receive complaints from registrant and member of the public, investigate these complaints, and dispose of these complaints. So this year, the inquiry committee reached a disposition and consent agreement completion for 2 cases. They reviewed the inspection and again disposed of these new inspection for 6 cases. And as the year ended on March 31st, they were still overseeing inspection with pending decision of 4 cases. After piloting a new risk analysis tool in 2018 and 19, the committee approved the tool as being a formal part of the inquiry process. And from now on, it is included in all inspection to make sure that we are consistent and fair in the decisions. There was also a policy revision as part of some of the board work that was done last year. Thank you, and the next slide. Okay, just a quick note to say that the discipline committee was not active this year, so we are not including a report in this meeting. I will now do a little reminder of the changes that I've just talked a little bit more in detail. We thought that it would be a nice opportunity today during the annual meeting to take some time to go over once again the important changes that the college did in the oversight of restricted activity and the continuing competence program. So as of April 1st, 2020, there are no longer administrative fees for dietitians to renew their restricted activities in BC. There is still a one-time administrative fee for initial application, but once dietitians apply and have their restricted activity on the public register, they do not need to pay a fee each year. With that, proof of competency is no longer registered at the registration process. This is moved to the oversight of the continuing competence program. When applying or reinstating for restricted activities, dietitian will be required to sign annually a declaration that confirms that they are competent and safe to practice restricted activities. And in this declaration, we have included a list of competencies to help dietitian identify what we mean by being competent and safe when they practice restricted activity. Next slide. For the continuing competence program, the cycle went from 3 years to 1 year. The submission will also now be due in March as opposed to October, and this will be tied to registration. So dietitian will be asked to submit their CCP between March 1st and March 31st, which is the window of when registration renewal is available. For each restricted activity practice, dietitian will be asked to elaborate one goal in their CCP report. That means that for restricted activity A and C, which covers enteral nutrition, dietitian will have to select one goal. And for restricted activity B, which is for parenteral nutrition, dietitian will have to report on one goal. We'd like to remind dietitian that you are not expected to do in 1 year what you are doing before in 3 years. So really, we are encouraging you to think about goals that are realistic on a 1 year timeline and making sure that these goals are smart. We know that the pandemic might be bringing challenges for continuing education this year. And again, we encourage dietitians to look at online activities to achieve learning goal, because we know that these activities can be appropriate if they are relevant to your practice. Thank you. Next slide. So overall, these changes will impact a big portion of Cdbc registrant. But when we decided to do these changes, we look at the numbers of things. First of all, these are more in line with provincial and national regulatory practices. They also reflect best practices and the literature available when it comes to professional regulation and management of risk and practice. It still preserves an oversight of high-risk activities for dietitian, so the college is still doing its job in making sure that dietitians are safe and competent to practice, but we are removing an administrative burden that the college had and will free up some time that we can spend on developing other resources that are helpful for our mandate. And lastly, we strongly believe that these changes will help be focused on client-centered care and also making sure that the activities that they choose in their CCP are tied to their individual scope of practice rather than a generic proof of competence and pre-approved list of learning. Next slide. I would also like to take a few words, to say a few words, to talk about COVID-19. First of all, I'd like to thank dietitians who have been involved in the pandemic. We know that this is a very stressful time, and as things are evolving now, I think it's still important to recognize the very important contribution that dietitians had during the pandemic and still have as of today. We know it was probably different for all of you, but everyone did their part, so thank you. The college also had to do important changes to keep the safety of all employees. So since March 16, we are operating as a virtual office. This means that we are not able to take on-site appointments and visit, and we also request that you email us if you want to have a telephone appointment. You still can leave voicemail. These are monitored daily and we have access to them, but the best way to reach us remains email. We are carrying all function of the college. We are able to register dietitian. The quality assurance program is going on as it should. We have the practice advisory available to you, and we are still investigating complaints if we are receiving them. Next slide. We have developed many resources for dietitians since the beginning of the pandemic. If you take a look at the website, and this is actually what you are seeing behind me, is the website that is on the homepage. In the top banner, you will see the news section. We have developed a specific page with all the COVID-19 guidelines and different resources since the pandemic started. You still have questions or maybe a unique situation in your practice, please reach out to us at info@collegeofdietitianbc.org. We will follow up with you as soon as possible, or we will direct you to maybe a guideline or resource that we have already developed and might be answering your question. Again, thank you to all dietitians who have helped to support the BC healthcare system during the pandemic, and I am sure that this will continue during the next few months. Next slide. Okay, I think I am close to the end of my talking. Thank you for bearing with my French accent as usual. The last thing that John spent some time discussing at the beginning during the board report is that the college this year received some news from the ministry around a project to modernize the BC Health regulatory framework. So in November 2019, the Ministry of Health issued a consultation paper who was proposing substantial changes to this framework. There were 4 big categories of changes that were announced and proposed: governance, oversight, number of colleges, and inquiry and discipline. Unfortunately, the modernization project was suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that the ministry will resume this work when they have capacity again, but the timeline and the final changes remain unknown at this time. The board collaborated with the Ministry of Health and other BC Health regulator by submitting two submissions and a proposition on what we thought about these proposed changes. And as of today, the college is still collaborating with other health BC regulator to see what modernization could mean for Cdbc and how we can improve and do a better job at regulating dietitian in BC. Next slide. Okay, this is the last part. We will spend some time looking at the audited financial statement. These are located at the very end of the annual report, and they look at each year between April 1st and March 31st. The audited financial statement is done by an external firm of the college, and it is an independent review of how we conduct our financial management. Next slide, please. So what you have in the table that you see on the slide is a comparison between the 2 years of operation, 2019 and 2020. You will see revenue, expenses, and other expenses. And at the end is the excess of revenue over expenses. You will see that this year in 2020, the college ended the fiscal year with an excess of revenue over expenses of $145,691. This surplus is explained by a number of factors. First of all, there was a higher number of initial registration and international assessment that the college had budgeted their revenue and expenses based on. Usually the college does those predictions using past year. We do an average of how many initial registration we have, how many renewal we have, and how many assessment we do. And this year, surprisingly, we had a lot more. There was also a turnover in staff, and I was away from 9 months during the fiscal year. So this led to decreased expenses in wages, in training, and also in liaison. Liaison are usually meeting I will attend, and also when I go and see registrants across the province. The college also had lower expenses in occupancy and administration because the board approved that we do an earlier move in the current shared office space that we have with 10 other colleges. We were successful in negotiating this with our past lease, and this was a good news because we were able to come and collaborate with other colleges. Finally, the last factor that contributed to this variance is that we have brought back a lot of the work that we were doing externally before for publication and communication, because we are very lucky to rely on the expertise and skill of Elena Hsu, who is the registration coordinator and executive assistant. So Elena is doing all of the beauty, that slides and report and the monthly update. This has contributed also to lower some of these expenses that we were paying for externally before. Next slide. The college last year presented to registrants that we have reached the goal for the restricted funds. The restricted funds are an internal pool of resources that can be accessed only by the board and through a board resolution. This is to support unexpected legal fee and discipline hearings, other unforeseen expenses, and purchase and maintenance of capital assets. Since the board have reached the 1 million goal as of last year, there is no need to keep adding to this fund. So the board will focus on using the available resources to spend on project that supports the mandate of the college. And in line with that, this is one of the reasons why the board did not increase fee this year. Next slide. Okay, we are now at the end of our report. It is time for question and answer before we look at approving the annual report, which John will propose when we are ready for that. But we would like to use at least 15 minutes if we have as much question as that for people to ask question. Question can be around some of the information that John and I presented. It can be around other information in the annual report. It can be on the audited financial statement or any other question in general regarding the college work. So I will ask Melanie Journeau, Deputy Registrar, to look at the question in the box, say them, and also direct to John or myself who will be answering the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanie and John, for a great summary of last year's key events at the college. So as of now, we don't have any questions. Maybe I can get us started with a question for Joanie. In the annual report, there was an interesting summary of a case, the Mary Moon case that our college was involved with. Could you tell us what that case will mean for dietitians in BC?
Yes, thank you, Melanie. And please, as I speak, go and use the question box and let us know if there's anything you would like us to cover. So the Mary Moon court case is a case around a lady who calls herself a death midwife and works in supporting people who are at the end of their life. She was taken to court by the College of Midwife of BC for misuse of title, who is protected in legislation. Title protection is something that almost every college have in legislation, and it is linked to the Health Profession Acts. After many, many months of courts hearing and work in that case, there was a judge last October, the Supreme Court of British Columbia, who rendered a decision saying that by taking away the right of Miss Mary Moon to use the title midwife, this was infringing her freedom of expression, and that the section of the legislation in the Health Profession Act that was supporting that was too constraining. So the judge did strike down this part of the act as part of his decision. This has implication for any colleges who is working under the Health Profession Acts, because this means that we could have issue enforcing title protection if we also have a case where people misuse the title dietitian. So the college did felt compelled by this decision, and as the College of Midwife appealed the decision last February, the board of directors supported the decision to apply to be an intervener to the case. So what this means is that we are submitting facts that supports the position of the College of Midwife and saying, well, we feel this section of the act is very relevant for dietitians. So this is what we have been doing since February, and as the fiscal year ended, the court proceeding were still ongoing, but the hearings was actually conducted this past June, and we are hoping to receive a decision by the judge within the next few months. And the Cdbc's position was supporting the importance of keeping title protection to ensure that we do our mandate of public protection.
Thank you, Joanie. That was a great response. Last call for any questions from anyone? I've opened it up both in the chat box and the Q&A box. If we don't have anything else, we will be moving forward. Pass it back to you.
Okay. We're now nearing the end of the annual general meeting. We need one more decision before adjourning. And before we get to that, let me ask, are there any suggestions or revisions to the annual report that you'd like to propose? And if you have, please send us a note in the Q&A box. And if you don't have time now, you can send it thereafter. Seeing none, I'd like to move the following resolution: that Cdbc registrants resolve to accept the 2019-2020 annual report as circulated. And I could ask you to please vote. Okay, this motion has passed and will be recorded in the minutes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we do have one question. And if I could turn it over to you to read.
Thank you, John.
See if I can turn my computer down. There you go.
Thanks, John. So we have one other questions. I think, Joanie, this one will be for you. So what other colleges are at the new office space?
Thank you, Melanie. So, okay, I think I will be able to answer this from my memory. So the new office space that we are sharing with are the College of Nursing Professional of BC, the College of Midwife of BC, the College of Chiropractor of BC, the College of Dental Technician of BC, the College of Denturists of BC, the College of Speech, Language, and Hearing Aids of BC, the College of Traditional Medicine Practitioner and Acupuncturist of BC, and College of Occupational Therapy of BC, College of Physical Therapists of BC, and ourselves. So that's actually 11. The College of Occupational Therapy of BC are office are technically located in Victoria, but they wanted to make sure that they have a space at the hub in order to promote and increase their collaboration with other BC health regulators. So they do have an office secure so that when they do come in Vancouver, they are able to be physically with other hub colleges. And Melanie, I think I have seen other questions come in, but I will let you say them.
Thank you, Joanie. On my end, I don't have any other questions. So if you see one on your panel, I'll let you take the helm.
Okay. Yes, I can read that one. The question is around amalgamation of regulatory colleges and the impact on registration fees rather than take on new projects. So this is a topic that has been discussed amongst regulator since this project was announced. It was also something that was mentioned by the Ministry of Health when they published their paper. So it was pointed out that between the 20 colleges in the health sector, there were a big variation in college fee. So it was something that was discussed. At this point in time, it is hard to answer what will be the impact on fee. When the board looks at establishing fee on a yearly basis, we look at the amount of money that is necessary to conduct all regulatory function. So when I did mention new project, Sometimes projects are linked directly to a function that we have been doing. And sometimes it is necessary because we need to review how we do things. But of course, this is always something that is discussed at the board each year. And as I mentioned, this year the board decided not to increase fee because we were in a good financial position, and also because we have been able to fulfill our mandate, including registration, quality assurance, and the investigation of complaints with the current budget that we have. And the money that that we have as a surplus of this year is also anticipated to be needed for potential amalgamation, because although there is a possibility that this could impact positively fees, there are also the real reality that this will also impact cost if we have to amalgamate with other colleges. John, would you like to speak more around fees and the financial aspect that may be linked to amalgamation?
Thanks, Joni. I think with respect to amalgamation, it's very, very difficult for us to see, as you mentioned, what that will look like, what the impact will be on the college. I mean, there's a myriad of questions with respect to our finances and how our risk fund, for example, will be managed. Those kinds of questions we do not have the answer to yet. I think, I guess it's safe to say that we just don't have the answers at this time. As mentioned, I think the modernization project may be delayed slightly because of COVID, but I think the government is planning to go forth with that as soon as they possibly can. But again, it would depend on if they get to it this year, or if next year comes and there is an election. We don't really know, but I think it's fair to say that we will be faced with a financial impact at some point, but we just don't know what that will be. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay, so are there any further questions? Okay, we don't have any other questions or any more questions, so we will adjourn the meeting by a resolution. But before we do, I'd like to thank staff for putting all this together, coming here today in the face of COVID to make this happen. And I'd also like to thank all the participants for being here as well, or being online. So thanks very much, everyone. And if you would like to get more involved, as I said at the outset, please think about joining us on the board at some point. And have a good day. Thank you very much. And we'll adjourn the meeting by consensus at 3:45.